They found her curled beside a broken gutter, wrapped in a tattered blue wrapper that barely shielded her from the Harmattan wind. At first glance, people thought she was just another mad girl, but then her eyes opened, slow, dark, and heavy, with quiet sorrow. That night, the streets of Isuba City buzzed with the sound of frying akara and roaring danfo buses, yet not a single soul stopped to ask her name. And just like that, a girl who had once been loved disappeared into a city that didn't care. Her name was Oma Dyke. She was 24, though her body looked older from hunger and hardship. Her skin, once smooth like shea butter, had turned, dry and cracked. Her hair, once full and braided in neat lines, now hung limp and dusty. She had once been the pride of her village, Umuoha, the only child of a schoolteacher and a seamstress, but the world had taken everything. First, her father, to a fever that came fast and left no time for goodbye. Then her mother, swallowed whole by the weight of unpaid hospital bills. The same neighbors who had once borrowed pepper now avoided her eyes. Her parents' house was sold, her dreams folded and buried with them, with nothing but a nylon bag. And 1,000 naira, she boarded a rickety bus to Isuba, the city of hope, or so the brochures said. But hope in Isuba came with thorns. She knocked on gates, she waited outside shops. She stood for hours in lines that never moved. People smiled at her politely, then turned her away. No vacancy, they said. Come back next week. But next week never came. Nights were the hardest. She slept inside an abandoned construction site, her wrapper clutched tight around her for warmth. Rats sometimes scurried near her feet. Her belly often cried louder than her mouth could. Still, she refused to beg, but even pride has a limit. On the other side of the city, where the roads gleamed and the air smelled like imported perfume, Adekunle Nkem sat in his glass office at the top of Nkem Tower, staring out at the blinking lights of Isuba below. He was 43, sharp, rich beyond reason. Born to a family of traders, Adekunle had clawed his way to the top through sheer will. Now he controlled oil fields in Port Amba, software companies in Abuja, and skyscrapers from Lagos to Nairobi. People called him the Leopard of Isuba, silent, deadly, untouchable. Yet tonight he felt hollow. The numbers on his screen meant nothing. 10 billion here, 5 billion there. What did it matter? He had no one to leave it to. No son. No daughter, no family, just lawyers and walls. His phone buzzed, a call from Dubai investors. He didn't answer. "Sir?" came a soft knock. His assistant, Zara, stepped in, her voice careful. "The investors are still holding." "Let them wait," he said without looking at her. Zara hesitated. Her boss never postponed business. Never. "Tell them I'll call tomorrow." She nodded and slipped away. Adekunle stood, sliding his hands into the pockets of his perfectly tailored kaftan, his jaw clenched. Marriage was out of the question. Love, a foolish game. He had seen powerful men destroyed by it. It made them weak, vulnerable. He had vowed never to let feelings rule him. But a child was different. He didn't need a wife. He didn't want the drama. He just needed an heir. Someone to carry his name, his blood, his legacy. And in that moment, an idea planted itself in his mind. That same evening, the city streets were alive with tired footsteps and the smell of roasted plantain. Oma sat on the edge of a cracked pavement near Ugwuma Junction, her arms wrapped around her knees, her stomach twisting. She watched a woman walk past with a hot plate of jollof rice. The aroma made her eyes sting. She hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. Her last meal had been a handful of gari soaked in sachet water. She looked away quickly, embarrassed by the growl in her belly. "Excuse me, sister," came a voice. She flinched. An elderly man stood before her, holding a loaf of bread and a bottle of water. He wore a faded brown agbada, and his eyes were kind. "You've been sitting here since morning," he said softly. "Please, take this." Oma stared at the bread. Her pride screamed no, but her body reached forward before she could stop herself. "Thank you," she whispered. "May the gods remember you," the man said, placing the food in her hands. He walked away without waiting for praise. The bread was dry, the water was lukewarm, but to her it tasted like heaven. Tears streamed down her face as she chewed slowly, carefully, like someone eating treasure. She didn't know it then, but her miracle was already watching. At that very moment, a black bulletproof SUV crawled down the narrow street. Inside, Adekunle sat tapping through emails, barely paying attention. "Traffic on the main road," his driver muttered. "I took a shortcut." Adekunle nodded vaguely, his eyes still on the screen. But then the car jolted over a pothole. He looked up. The street was darker here, cramped, lined with tiny kiosks and tired shops, the kind of place he hadn't seen in years. Then he saw her, a young woman, alone on the roadside. She wasn't asking anyone for help, but something in her stillness caught his eye. Her wrapper was faded but clean. Her face, though worn, held quiet defiance. Her eyes were not broken, just tired. "Stop the car," he said. The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "Sir?" "I said stop." The air smelled like roasted corn and diesel. Street lights flickered above the cracked pavement where the girl sat, her back straight, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on nothing. The city moved around her, footsteps, music, impatient drivers blaring horns. But she didn't move. She just clutched her threadbare bag as if it carried her soul. The black SUV came to a slow stop beside her. He lowered the window. "Do you need help?" His voice was level, unreadable, controlled like always. Oma turned her head slowly, her eyes locked onto his. There was no fear there, no pleading, just guarded silence. She hesitated. Her fingers gripped her bag tighter, as if it might disappear. "I'm fine." He knew she wasn't. He could see it in the slump of her shoulders, the cracked skin on her lips, the quiet desperation in her stillness. But he also saw pride, the kind that refused to bow even when the stomach growled. He reached into the inside pocket of his agbada and pulled out a fresh stack of crisp notes. It was more money than she had ever held. "Take it," he said, holding it out. She didn't move. Her eyes flicked from the money to his face, then back again. Suspicion bloomed behind her expression. "Why?" "No reason," he replied, simply. A silence stretched between them, thick and long like a rope tugged in a game only one of them knew they were playing. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "I can't." Adekunle frowned. No one refused his money, especially not someone with visible hunger carved into their cheeks. "You need it," he said evenly. She lifted her chin a fraction, her back straightening. "I need a job, not charity." Adekunle studied her carefully. A street girl with fire. A stranger who still held on to something most of the world had given up. Dignity. Interesting. He rolled the window up without another word and signaled the driver to move. As the SUV crawled forward, he glanced back at her one last time in the side mirror. She hadn't moved, but something about her stayed with him. Their second meeting wasn't fate, it was by design. Adekunle had instructed his staff to track her down, discreetly, thoroughly. It took 2 days. Her name, Oma Dyke. No parents, no known relatives. No fixed residence, no job. Just a girl swallowed by a city that forgot people like her existed. He arranged a private meeting. The room was quiet, rich with the scent of polished wood and leather. Oma sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, legs crossed at the ankles, spine stiff like a soldier waiting for orders. "I have a proposition," Adekunle said. Her heart thudded once, loud and heavy. "I need a child," he continued. "You need money, let's help each other." Her breath caught. "You want me to have your child?" "Yes, no attachments, no emotions, just a clean transaction." The silence roared in her ears. It wasn't the first time someone had looked at her like a vessel, but this was different. This was planned, controlled. "How much?" 100 million naira. Her mouth went dry. That kind of money could change her life. She could rent a home, build a shop, help other girls like her, leave hunger behind forever. But it came with a cost. A slow, deep breath filled her chest. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "I'll do it." 2 days later, they sat again, this time inside Adekunle's sprawling mansion in Zima Heights. The chandelier above them sparkled with false stars. A stack of papers sat between them on a polished table, ink and legal words forming a contract more binding than chains. Oma stared at the documents, her stomach twisted. She could barely read them, but she understood what they meant. "You'll live in a private residence," Adekunle said, voice calm. "Top medical care, all expenses covered. After the birth, you'll receive your payment and walk away." She reached for the papers, her hands trembling slightly. "And you?" she asked, her voice lower than intended. "You won't be involved at all? That's not part of the agreement." The words landed like stones. "Not even when the child asks about you?" Adekunle's gaze sharpened. "Children don't ask about people they've never met." The words stung more than she expected. She bit her lip and stared at the pages again. She thought of her parents, of all she'd lost, all she could gain. Could she trade her body, her future, her womb for money? She wanted to run. But where? Back to the street, back to gnawing hunger. A voice pierced her thoughts. Adekunle's again. "If you're having second thoughts, say so now. I don't like uncertainty." She looked up. His face was still unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. Not impatience, not anger. Something else. She took a breath, deep, shaky, and signed. Oma sat on the edge of a wide, soft bed. The room gleamed, all marble, silk, and gold, bigger than her parents' entire house back in Umuoha. The wardrobe overflowed with dresses she hadn't picked. The fridge hummed full of food. The television was the size of a church door, but none of it felt like hers. She couldn't leave without permission. Guards watched her movements. The staff barely spoke. Even the doctor, who came twice a week, spoke to her like she was just a task. At night she stood by the window watching Isuba glitter in the distance. She pressed a hand to her stomach, small, still flat. "Are you lonely too?" she whispered. A small flutter answered her, a ghost of a kick. She smiled and cried. When the storm arrived, the clock struck 12:04 a.m. The city had gone quiet, save for the occasional bark of a stray dog and the distant hum of passing cars. In his penthouse suite, Adekunle Nkem sat in the dark, the soft glow of his phone the only light in the room. He stared at her name in his contact list for a long time, thumb hovering over the call button. Then he pressed it. It rang once. Then, twice. "Hello?" Her voice was soft, laced with sleep, fragile. He checked the time again, suddenly unsure. He should have ended the call, should have apologized. But instead he asked, "How are you feeling?" The words slipped out before he could take them back. A long silence answered him. "Fine," she said at last. But he knew she wasn't. He heard it in her tone, flat and hollow. He heard it in the pause before she spoke. Another silence passed, thick as smoke. He didn't know what to say, didn't know why he was calling, only that he needed to hear her voice. "Why are you calling this late?" she asked, quieter now. He could have lied, told her it was about her next appointment or a check-in, but he said nothing, because the truth was a room he hadn't dared to enter. That same night, the world shifted. Oma jolted upright in bed, her hand flying to her belly. A sharp pain had exploded through her, stealing her breath. She gasped, eyes wide, heart thudding. Then it came again, stronger, deeper, twisting her from the inside out. She gripped the bedsheets with trembling fingers. This was it. The baby was coming. She reached for her phone with shaking hands. Logic screamed at her to call the doctor. But her instincts pressed a different name. Adekunle. It rang twice. He answered. "Why are you calling this late?" he said, just as he always did. But her voice was different now, tight with pain. "It's happening," she gasped. "It's time." There was a beat of stunned silence. Then his voice changed. The calm was gone, replaced by something sharp. "Where are you?" Another wave of agony hit her. She couldn't answer right away. She sucked in air through clenched teeth. "The penthouse," she managed. He heard her pain. Heard the trembling in her voice, the strain. "Don't move," he said. "I'm coming." The line went dead. She dropped the phone as another contraction rolled through her like a crashing wave. Her body curled instinctively, clutching. The ache. For the first time in months she was afraid. Truly afraid. Adekunle hadn't moved when his second phone buzzed again. A number he didn't recognize. He answered anyway. "Sir, this is the security team at Zima Heights. Miss Omar is in distress. We believe she's in labor." Adekunle was already on his feet. His chair clattered backward. "Is she alone?" "Yes, sir. The staff is standing by, but she's locked the room." He didn't respond. He simply turned to his associates, who had been in the middle of discussing a multi-million naira merger. Meeting's over. They stared at him, stunned, but he was already gone. The ride to the penthouse felt like the longest drive of his life. The city blurred past in streaks of color and noise, but his mind was still unfocused, frantic, foreign to itself. This wasn't part of the deal. He wasn't supposed to feel like this, but he did. The moment the gates opened, Adekunle didn't wait for the driver to park. He jumped out, stormed through the front doors, and climbed the stairs 2 steps at a time. No elevator, no delays. He burst into the room and stopped. There she was, curled up on the bed, her wrapper soaked with sweat, her skin pale. She looked up at him through half-lidded eyes. They were wild, afraid, and somehow still soft. He stepped forward. "Let's go." She nodded weakly, unable to speak. He lifted her into his arms, carefully, gently, as if she might shatter. Her head rested against his shoulder as the staff opened doors without a word. Within minutes they were in the car, sirens wailing as their convoy sped through the streets. For the first time in his life, Adekunle Nkem felt it. Not fear of failure. Not fear of death, but fear of losing something he hadn't even admitted he cared about. The hospital lights were blinding. Doors flew open, nurses rushed forward. "She's in labor." Her grip on his shirt loosened, her voice faint. "Don't leave." His throat clenched. "I'm here." He didn't let go. Even when the nurses tried to pull her away, she reached for his hand. "Adekunle," she whispered. He gripped it tighter. "I'm not going anywhere." They wheeled her into the delivery room, and for the first time in his life, he followed without question. Hours passed, hours of pain, of contractions that rocked her body like earthquakes. Doctors gave sharp instructions, nurses moved fast, monitors beeped. But Adekunle stayed. Right. There, at her side, his hand in hers. "You're doing well," he whispered. "Just hold on." He didn't know where the words came from. He had never said them to anyone before. "It hurts," she cried. "I know," he said, eyes stinging. He wanted to take her pain, wanted to breathe for her, carry the weight. A nurse leaned over. "It's time." Omar shut her eyes. Her body trembled. Then, a sharp cry. A new sound entered the world, loud, fragile, alive. The baby. Their baby. Adekunle exhaled, breath shaking. But then something shifted. The room changed. The doctor didn't smile. His eyes flicked between Adekunle and the newborn. Something was wrong. "Mr. Nkem," the doctor began, cautious. "The child. His hair." Adekunle stepped forward, confused. "What about it?" Omar turned her head, breathless. She saw it too. The baby's hair wasn't black, wasn't even dark brown. It was reddish, almost golden under the lights. Her heart dropped. "That's impossible," Adekunle said, voice cold. Omar looked at him. "Adekunle." "I want a DNA test," he snapped. His tone was sharper than glass. The room froze. Omar's breath hitched. The doctor hesitated. "Sir, sometimes these things—" "Do it," Adekunle said, eyes fixed on the baby. "Now." The doctor nodded, eyes wide. He left. Leaving. The silence behind. The tension in the hospital room hung heavy, like thick smoke curling into every corner. The machines beeped softly, a mechanical rhythm trying to cover up the silence between them. The cries of other newborns drifted from nearby rooms, reminding them of what had just happened and what might still be lost. Omar turned her face, away, blinking rapidly. She refused to let the tears fall, not now, not while he was still standing there, still silent. Adekunle Nkem stood frozen, hands clenched at his sides, jaw tight. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared. Time dragged like a wounded animal. Then finally the door opened. The doctor stepped in, holding a slim folder. His expression was composed, but his fingers gripped the file too tightly. Adekunle straightened. "Well," the doctor cleared his throat. "Mr. Nkem, the child is yours." Oma's eyes fluttered shut, a long breath escaping her lips. Relief washed over her in a quiet wave. But Adekunle didn't react, he didn't sigh, didn't nod. He simply stared ahead, still carved from stone. "There's a rare recessive gene," the doctor explained. "Pigmentation like that. It sometimes skips generations. Someone in your bloodline must have had it." A long, weighted pause followed. Adekunle's fists relaxed. His eyes dropped to the small bundle lying in Oma's arms. The infant, swaddled in soft blue cloth, let out a tiny sigh and blinked in his sleep. His son. His blood. Then why did it feel like something had broken? Oma watched him carefully. She waited for him to step forward, to say something, anything. But he didn't. Instead, without a word, he turned around and walked out. The door closed behind him with a whisper. The moment it did, her throat tightened. She had expected him to be cold. She had prepared herself for that. She had accepted that he would always be distant. But this silence, this abandonment, it sliced deeper than she imagined. She looked down at the sleeping child in her arms. His tiny fingers curled slightly. His chest rose and fell in gentle rhythm. Her heart broke, not for herself, but for him. This child didn't ask to be born, didn't ask to be the result of a deal. He deserved more than this, more than a father who ran away the moment things got real. Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. "He'll come back," she whispered to the baby, rocking him gently. "He has to." But even as she said it, doubt crept in like cold water beneath a door. Outside in his car, Adekunle sat rigid in the back seat. The engine was off. The city moved beyond the glass, fast, loud, uncaring, but his world had slowed to a crawl. His mind was a storm. He had spent years building walls, years teaching himself not to feel, not to trust, not to love. And now there was a child with reddish curls, a woman who had looked at him in that hospital room not with anger, but with pain and understanding. And he had run. Not because he doubted, but because for the first time in his life he was afraid. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and breathed. All his life he'd been in control, always knew the next move, always had a plan. But this was different. He didn't know what to do. Back in the hospital room, the silence had grown comfortable, the kind that wraps around you in sadness, but doesn't choke you. Oma sat with the baby in her arms, staring at nothing, rocking him slowly. She told herself not to hope. She told herself it was over. Until the door creaked open. She turned, and there he was. Adekunle stood in the doorway. His face was unreadable, no rage, no sorrow, just a kind of stillness she hadn't seen before. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then, finally, he stepped inside. One quiet step, then another. "I shouldn't have left," he said. A small, dry laugh escaped her. "But you did." His jaw clenched. "I didn't know how to handle it." She studied him. Not the suit, not the man the world knew, but the eyes, the way. They shifted toward the baby, then back to her. "No," she said softly. "You mean you didn't know how to handle feeling?" A silence followed, but it wasn't heavy, it wasn't tense, it was honest. Adekunle nodded once, slowly. His eyes returned to the baby, and this time he didn't look away. The first time he didn't run. Days passed. They left the hospital quietly. Adekunle arranged for them to return to the penthouse. It was logical, he told himself. The baby needed rest. Oma needed recovery. It was practical. But even he knew it wasn't logic that drove the decision. One afternoon, He sat in his office, a report open in front of him. He hadn't read a word. His fingers tapped the desk absent-mindedly. His mind, for once, wasn't filled with numbers or deals or contracts. It was filled with her, with them. The way she had looked at him, not as a tycoon, but as a man. The way the baby had grasped his thumb, so small, so trusting. He had built his empire to feel powerful, but holding that child had made him feel something else. Whole. Meanwhile, Oma packed. The contract had ended. The baby was here. The deal was complete. She folded her clothes quietly into the same bag she had brought months ago. A bag once filled with dreams, now filled with truth. She didn't cry. She just accepted it. Until the door opened. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. "You're leaving," Adekunle said, his voice low. She zipped the bag. "I kept my end of the agreement." Silence followed, then a heavy breath. "I don't want an heir," he said quietly. Oma froze. "I want my son." She turned slowly. "And I want you." His voice trembled slightly on the last word, not with weakness, but with honesty. Her heart pounded. For the first time, there was no contract between them, just the truth. And this time, he wasn't letting go. What if love finds you when you least expect it? Adekunle Nkem never believed in love, never trusted it. But life had other plans, and now, he had a family he never knew he needed. Sometimes the things we fear the most, love, connection, vulnerability, are the very things that make us whole. True strength isn't in building walls, but in letting someone in. And sometimes the family we never planned for becomes the home we were always searching for. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Share this tale with someone who still believes in unexpected love. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next unforgettable story.